been a little bit since I've done a video on the Monkey. It's been really hot here in Central Florida. I've had a lot going on at work, so I haven't had too much time to get to the bike, but I do have a modification that I want to make, and it has to do with the clutch. So as I've added more power with the various mods I've done to the bike, I've got to the point now where the clutch isn't nearly as bitey as it needs to be. I've also never really liked the feel of the clutch. The clutch is really light, very much unlike my ZX6R, and even my new 190cc Honda CT70 that has a clutch that has a different feel. It feels you've got to put a little bit of effort into moving the clutch lever, where on this one I could use my pinky and fully depress it. But I think what's happening is the clutch springs are just so light that the added power from the modifications that I've done to the bike just overtake the tension from the springs, and it's slipping. So I've got two things that I'm going to install today. I've got the Sex Machine Racing 60% stiffer clutch lifter springs and a new CNC clutch lifter plate from Chimera. There's a few different companies that are making both the springs and the lifter plate. I went with the Sex Machine Racing springs just because it had the best reviews, and 60% seemed to be about the stiffest springs that you could get. And as far as the lifter plate, Koso also makes one that I thought aesthetically looked a little bit better, but it had pretty poor reviews. Apparently the bearing that goes in the center of the lifter plate sometimes is off by a couple of thousandths of an inch and doesn't fit quite right, and the clutch doesn't work correctly. So the Chimera had not too many reviews, but the ones that it did were positive, so we'll give this a shot. The reason why it's recommended to replace the lifter plate when you're putting in heavier springs is that the cast aluminum plate that comes stock on the bike, once it has that added tension of the heavier springs, has a tendency to snap eventually. So the CNC aluminum one hopefully will be a little bit stronger and last a bit longer. First, I need to take off the exhaust. I need to move my rear sets back a little bit, I think. And I'll probably take off these oil ports before I remove the Katako clutch cover. I also did buy an extra gasket for the clutch cover. The last time that I took this off, and it was when the bike only had about 100 or so miles on it, the gasket looked perfect, so I reused it. Now with closer to, I think, 1,500 miles, I'm not sure if the gasket is going to come off as cleanly. If it does, I'm going to try to reuse it. If not, I got one that I can use when I put it back together. All right, so I've got the exhaust off. It looks like I might not have to move my rear sets, but we're gonna see. I have the line disconnected from my oil breather tube. I have the clutch line off. So I think I'm ready to slip it out. I'm gonna go ahead and just leave these oil port lines on, because if I take them off, I'm going to have to use new crush washers. And I think I can just pull this off and set this into this box that I have some paper and hopefully to sop up any oil that's left over. I did drain the oil already, so there shouldn't be too much coming out of the case here. I pulled all the bolts out. They're all torqued to 9 foot-pounds. They're all also the same size, so you don't have to spend too much time worrying about which ones came from where. You can just pull them all out. This last one actually doesn't come all the way out because it's hitting this oil port. I could pull it out, but I think it's out enough that it'll just remain there. So let's go ahead and pop this off. And that was pretty easy. The gasket also still looks really good, so I'm going to go ahead and just leave that as is. So set that there. And so then this is what I'm replacing. This is the lifter that has the 6 springs behind it. Here's the new CNC lifter, and the springs are right behind it. All right, so the old springs are off, and here's the clutch lifter plate that I need to pull this bearing out. Looks like it just slips out, and reverse the process. These springs feel significantly different as far as how difficult it is to compress. So I think this is where it's going to get tricky, because I need to put a lot of pressure down on this to get the bolts threaded through, I think, while I keep each piece lined up correctly. Alright, forgive the noise in the background. I've got the fan going because it's pretty warm. I popped a new bearing in here. I used a socket to lightly tap it into place, but have it fully seated. So again, now it's just a matter of getting the bolts lined up so that I can just reverse the process and close this up. Alright, so I'm calling in a third hand to get this seated. Come here. Okay, stop. Alright, so that first one definitely required the third hand where I put pressure here and then she could get purchase on that first bolt. But now I have, I think, a good situation where it's far enough down that I can get these final 2 bolts in myself. Just checking to make sure everything stayed pretty lined up. Alright, so to take these 10mm bolts off, I used an electric impact wrench to spin them off easily, but putting them back on requires a little bit more finesse. So these are torqued at 9 foot-pounds or 108 inch-pounds. So I've got my torque wrench set up here. To prevent this from spinning, I'm going to again use my nifty penny to jam in between the 2 gears here. Move it to get some tension on it. And just hope I don't lose it in the engine. One, two, so proper torque for this is pretty important. On the forums I read of a lot of different folks having trouble where they didn't use a torque wrench and either over or under torque these bolts and didn't have the correct clutch usage. So hopefully that's going to work because those were torqued correctly. I'm going to put it back together and fire it up. One other thing to mention while I'm in here, since I don't expect to be in here too often, is to take a look at this filter screen. It's pretty clean. There's a couple of small metal shavings there that I'll clean up and slot that back in. Alright, so it's super hot, but I want to go for a ride and see how this does. Just the feel of the lever now is much better. Feels actually almost exactly like the ZX6R as far as the amount of pressure I need to put to engage the clutch. So let's see if it all works. Yeah, that feels much better now. Coming out of first is where I was getting a little bit of slipping before, and that seemed to lock up pretty well. We'll ride around a bit though and try a few starts and stops to really feel it out. Yeah, no slipping there. Alright, well I'm really happy with that install. It was actually a lot easier than advertised. There was only one point where I had my wife screw in that first bolt while I depressed the first set of springs, but after that it was pretty straightforward. So pretty easy install, relatively inexpensive. I'll go ahead and link to the springs and the Chimera lifter plate that I used on this project. If you're new to my channel, check out this whole build series. I've got quite a few videos on a lot of different mods, or all the mods pretty much that I've done on this 2019 Monkey. I've got a few other builds that I'm working on. I am pretty much finished with my 190cc CT70 project, and it came out absolutely amazing. So I'll have an update video on that build, and I've actually got a plan to redo my 1969 bike that was a little retro mod. I think I'm going to actually make it more of a real restoration. So lots more to come for this bike and the other bikes on my channel. I appreciate everybody watching. Stay tuned for more videos. Thanks.